Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for our latest podcast. And if you're expecting an inspection anytime soon by the regulator CQC, we hope that you're ready. And today's conversation is for all of the providers out there that have been maybe waiting a little bit longer for an inspector to come along and knock on their door. And during that time, where it does sometimes take a year or so, or if not longer, to get an inspector knocking on the door, we can often get quite anxious, I think, and get quite nervous. And for me, I think the anxiety is not actually about the inspector or the practice that we are carrying out in our care services, but it's just that anticipation of wanting to be able to showcase exactly some of the amazing care that we're delivering. And we're really, really blessed today to be joined by Nikki Rogers, who's spent many years working inside the system with the NHS and the ICBs down on the South Coast. And she's been in rooms with the commissioners and with the regulators and has some amazing experience to hopefully share with us this afternoon around what it is that the inspectors and the regulators and commissioners are looking for in our services when they come and knock on the door. But also she has some really interesting insight into when we as providers aren't in the rooms and conversations are happening about our services. Nikki now works in the private sector and helps support care providers and care homes. And Nikki, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
I'll hand over to Robin. And Robin, we can hopefully have a really good conversation around quality and the quality pillar that we're here to discuss today.
I'm looking forward to it. I think it'd be really interesting. This is a conversation, I think, for anyone who's ever had that knock on the door and had to take a breath because you know it's CQC and you think, I hope we're ready. If you feel that in your tummy or your heart sinks, even though you think everything is up together, this is something that we hope will be useful for you. That reaction isn't about the inspector. That person doesn't make a material difference to how you're feeling in that moment. What matters, I think, is how you know you've prepared or where you're worried that you haven't prepared. And a lot of that is about whether what you're actually doing matches what you say you're doing. So is what's appearing on the paperwork, whether that's physical paperwork or digital paperwork, living up to the processes that you've set for yourself and for your service. So we're really pleased to have you with us, Nikki. Thank you so much for joining us. Nikki knows a lot about scrutinising care homes, but also about working to make them better and to improve their quality. As a former quality lead in the NHS, she has a good sense of what regulators and commissioners are looking for, and she also knows what they say when we're not there. This is Inside the Care Home. Thank you, Nikki, for being here. Thank you to everyone who's listening for joining us. We want to talk a little bit about why inspections can sometimes surprise us. And sometimes they surprise us in ways that we're not looking forward to. Things come up that we hadn't thought of, or something surfaces that we really thought was under control. Samir, is that something that you can relate to as an operator?
I think it's really important that we try and control the controllables. There are always going to be some things that we can't account for or prepare for. But one thing that I think we've tried to do in our services over the years is to really practice inspections. I mentioned earlier on that maybe we're not getting inspected as much as we once did back in the day. But I think it's really important that we get those reps and we build that confidence so that when we do get an inspection, that we are ready, as I said earlier, to really showcase some of the amazing care we're doing. But like you say, I think it is being organised, it's being prepared and getting the team on board, not to have that negativity or to be running away when an inspector does come in, but actually to run towards the inspector, right? To talk about what they're doing and to be really proud of the care they're delivering.
What do you think being a digital home does for you? And indeed, what doesn't it do for you when the inspector comes?
I think we have to be very mindful of not bombarding an inspector maybe with too much information. Making sure that we are really open and honest and transparent in the data we're collecting. But it's actually to pick out some of those impactful stories that the data can maybe tell us about how we've been delivering care for a particular person, and the impact that it's had on the outcomes for the residents that we look after. But not only the residents, we spoke about this a lot, haven't we, Robin, is that our people are our most important asset and the team members. So, if we are digitally evolved, it's actually, well, how has the technology we've implemented also positively impacted our team members in it being able to deliver the care they want to be delivering and that they can be proud of delivering?
Thank you. I think we want to try and resonate with as many care providers as we can. So if that feels like something that somebody listening can relate to, stay with us for the rest of this conversation. Nikki, if I can ask you, you've seen this from both sides. You spent a long time working with providers as a representative of the commissioning bodies. Now you work with providers from inside the provider. How is that different? And what do you think would surprise providers?
I think I'm not really sure that it's amazingly different, apart from the fact that I think it's easier to see the scope of what you do when you're not looking at fixed parameters. And I think that when you're in a commissioning service, you sometimes forget that when you're not there, the world still continues. And I think that's probably the same for CQC, to be fair. They forget that actually, you're a 24/7 service, and that when they're not there, you still need to deliver things. And I think that it's surprising how much information CQC know before they arrive.
Okay.
And I think that homes sometimes struggle with the fact that they will have done a fair bit of background work before. So they will have spoken to people that you are involved with. So they'll have spoken to the county council, they will have spoken to the ICB. And it's, if you are have sort of nursing responsibilities, they might have even spoken to your community care team as well, and they will have picked up all of that information, so they will have quite a lot of information before they arrive. And I think sometimes they don't realize that they've already been out there and asking those questions.
So that can really take you by surprise if somebody's coming in to ask you about incidents that you didn't expect them to know about, I suppose. Or
Yes. And I think that, there's lots of information out there, even things like Google reviews, they will have looked at that sort of thing. And if you've got a poor Google review, for whatever reason, or not necessarily a poor one, but one that's asked a question, and perhaps you haven't responded to that Google review, actually they will probably ask you about it, because they'll want to know why haven't you not responded it.
And to flip the question, what surprised you when you made that change from working in commissioning to working on the other side, if you like? Like that brutal, but
yeah, I think again, it's that, there's so much going on in care homes all the time, and I think that we're really good in commissioning. Not that I'm there now. We're really good at thinking that you deliver this is the service that you deliver, and we forget sometimes that actually your clients don't fit into a neat little box, and actually, yes, you are delivering this care, but actually that's different for everybody. And personal centered care means something different to every single person that you're looking after, as well as every single person that's delivering that care.
Okay, so perhaps that's something providers need to remember that they know, because I think in a lot of services it's been quite well internalised, hasn't it? And we kind of forget that not everywhere does that, until perhaps somebody goes into hospital and we can see that the care that they receive there is not as personalised as they would at home.
Yeah, I think, and I think it's about shouting about that, because I think that's one of the things that CQC will quite often say, is that I can see that they are delivering good care, but it's not recorded. There's no way of saying that we've stepped out of the norm of something to do something for somebody, and actually, great, that's fantastic, but where have you recorded that?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that CQC will quite often say, is that we can see that the clients are well looked after, and that they're delivering really good care, but it's not backed up by what you've written down.
Is that something you think is a major place for providers to look? If they're worried about an inspection, is that perhaps the first question they should ask themselves? What am I doing but not documenting?
I think it is. I think it is something that, because it's normal for you. I think that's the thing. It's your day-to-day business, and so you think, I don't need to write that down, that I've done something specifically for somebody, but actually you do, because actually that's what is the difference between being good and being outstanding.
Right, which is what we're all aiming for, I think, is to climb those dizzy heights all the way up to outstanding. In thinking about quality as a slightly wider question, how well do you think providers really understand what it means? We all know it's there, and it's one of those, is it safe? Is it responsive? Is it those big questions? But do you think we get a little lost sometimes thinking about, are we being caring, and forget perhaps the consistency, or the whatever it is that you would say quality actually means?
I think consistency is really important, and about showing that you're being consistent, because yes, you need to have your standards across your homes, but it's about making sure that standard's reached every day, and I think that's sometimes what, you know, you work so hard in your homes, and you're working all the time making sure that all your care plans are sorted out and everything out, but it's about that, looking for those consistencies in your home, and also that being able to be adaptive, to change that consistent message between your clients, because, you know, yes, we want to make sure that you're delivering all the right care, and that might be perfect for one person, but if you then try and deliver that exact same care to somebody else, that's not going to work. So it's about, yes, being consistent, but also being able to be adaptable in that consistency, which is difficult to prove, I think.
So having some consistent principles and processes, but being able to apply those to different individuals or different situations in appropriate ways.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Do you think that's where people come unstuck? There certainly are services who feel comfortable that everything's going well, they've got things under control, they're not experiencing a lot of falls or major safeguarding issues, and then CQC come in and the rating requires improvement, and that I think emotionally can feel really difficult. You can feel quite let down by life in those circumstances. What would you say are the big dangers for somebody to look for that might be something that could happen to them?
I think it's looking beyond the task. You have a task to do, you know, your personal care, let's say that's the task that you've got to complete. That's grand, but you're treating an individual, and it's making sure that task suits that individual. So it's, you know, I don't know, anything from I like this particular towel, or I have three flannels that all have to do different things. You know, it's about making sure that task is consistent. So your task is good, but then the adaptability comes in as how I'm going to make that right for that person.
So
yeah,
always doing something in a person-centered way, and presumably recording that in a person-centered way as well. Yes.
You know, it's great if you've got something identified in a care plan. You know, I can remember looking at a care plan about somebody who was having a bath, and they had very specific things about what they wanted in the bathroom, about, you know, the bubble bath that they wanted and all that sort of thing. And that was great until I then went and spoke to that person. They said, oh yeah, but they never use the bubble bath I like. Well, that's great, because your care plan says exactly what you want, but actually, so there's your task, but you're not being adaptable, you're not doing it in the right ways for that particular person. And I think that's sometimes where it's difficult for managers wherever they are, whether in either dom care or in a home, because you think you walk past and you'll know that Gladys had a shower or her bath and that's grand, but actually has it been done the way that she wants it done?
What do you think a manager can do about that? I suppose acknowledging it is the first important thing. So sort of admit to yourself that just because it says that on this system that I'm looking at, it doesn't automatically translate into action.
I think it is that walking about and being present and checking things, but it's also about talking to your staff. Your staff, as you said earlier on, are your most important asset, and it's about, okay, so if you find that they haven't used the particular bubble bath that they want, actually why didn't you? And actually having that conversation with them, and not in a sort of like, why didn't you do that? Not in a threatening, judgmental way, but actually just tell me why that this hasn't happened, because actually there may have been a really good reason. And actually it may be something that your carers know, that actually the last time you used that bubble bath, she got a reaction on her skin, but actually that hasn't translated into so what we're going to do about that. And I think it is about having a really clear communication, and for you to have that with your carers, but also for your carers to be able to feel that they can come back and say, actually, this is what's written in a care plan, this is the care we're supposed to deliver, but it's not working, and why it's not working, because then that gives you the opportunity to change that with that resident and make it work for them.
When you go into a care home, and you've been into lots of care homes, I know, so when you walk in the door, do you think you get a sense of whether or not that feedback loop exists, whether there is a connection, I suppose, between the care plan and the day-to-day activity? Do you get a kind of vibe of that?
I think you do. I think you can walk into a home and know that there's good communication, because you can see it happening. You can see that the carers are talking to each other and they're talking to the manager, but also to the cook and to the cleaner and to the the maintenance man. You can see that those conversations going on, and unfortunately you can see it if you walk into a home and it's not happening. The doors are shut going into the managers, or and that's consistently shut, not just shut because they're doing something, or something's highlighted that something needs to be fixed, and you can't speak to the maintenance man because actually you just have to email him, because he doesn't come to meetings, and he's not part of the home fabric, so you can't just have that off the cuff conversation. So you can see it, and I think that's the really good thing about having outside people sometimes come into your home, because you don't always notice that, because you're living that all the time.
I was just going to ask you that. None of that actually sounds very difficult to do, but it sounds quite difficult to do it for your own home.
Yeah, you almost need like a secret shopper.
Yeah.
That's one of the things we used to say, is that that we were like secret shoppers, because we would come in and we would have that helicopter view of what's going on, and we have because we don't work for the homes, it was really easy for us to say, well, actually, this really isn't working, or something doesn't seem right, and it's about how you then hear that. Constructive criticism is really a part of quality, because you need to be able to hear when things aren't going quite right, so that you can then change things.
I know that's really big for you, Samir, that mindset that you have and you feel very strongly that your team need to have about continuous improvement and building on the things that you're doing well and doing more of them, but also identifying the things that you do less well. We've talked before about hearing that difficult stuff and being open to it. How do you encourage that mindset in your team?
Yeah, it's a great question, because just because you're at a 90% compliance rate potentially, those little 1%ers can always make the difference, right? We always want to get better, have that kind of growth mindset of what we can do to get better. If we can get to 91%, brilliant, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to do and provide the best outcomes we can for our residents. For me, what we've tried to implement over the years has been very much around our core values, and that we hold ourselves really, really accountable to those at all levels. So that's even, at the at director and owner level. Mm-hmm. But when we are making decisions, that we have this framework about, well, look, this is our group collaboratively produced core values. Is what I'm deciding upon, is that the most collaborative way for us to make this decision? Has it been really honest? Is it a reliable way of how we're making that decision? And is it caring? We've got our list of 10 that we tend to work through. And I think that's really helped keep us with the compass pointed in the right direction, that we are trying to make decisions that are for the betterment. But what it also allows you to do is actually to be really open. And I mentioned honesty as one of those core values that we have, because it's unrealistic for us to expect that we're going to get everything right all of the time. We are human. There can be extenuating circumstances. There can be lots of things potentially happening, and that feed into a decision that we make at that particular moment, that when you look back on it in a week's time, maybe you'd have done something slightly differently. But what I think is really important is that we don't just brush it under the carpet, and we don't just think it'll be fine next time, because actually that's where you allow those little slips. Then they become the new norm, and they become the new consistent attribute. And that's what we want to avoid. We want to set those standards, and we want to maintain those standards. We want to maintain that quality, and we want to keep it as consistent as possible. But one thing that's also helped us is not just that kind of that subjective way of analysing it, maybe through our core values, but aligning that with some of the data that we collect in the homes as well. I think that's been really, really helpful, because again, sometimes you have a gut feeling that something's not quite right. As you say, you could walk into a room, can't you, or walk into a home, and you just think there's something not quite off here. But then actually, when you dig into some of that data, that might be around staff feedback, for example, or resident feedback, actually that'll all be really glowing, and they only did that last week. So maybe my gut was off that day. But I think it's important you have all these different avenues to explore. But yeah, mindset for me is really, really important. And we talk a lot in our leadership team around not being closed off. And when we do get some feedback, that I think because we tend to put our heart and soul into the care we're delivering, don't we? We put our all into it. And it can be quite a shock when you hear something that you didn't want to, that you would hate to think would be the case. And so sometimes that could put our guard up. So I think, again, what we try to do is be really open-minded and explore the situation, try and understand the other point of view, and then hopefully we can look to make some meaningful change so that that person doesn't feel that way again in the future. And that's how we try to grow.
Listening to you describe that mindset, it feels as if you work very hard on your quality through your leadership. Nikki, I'm going to ask you, because I want to ask Samir about his leadership. How important do you think leadership is, and how much do you feel you can tell about a service when you either meet the people leading that service, or you get a sense of what that leadership is like?
I think the leadership is the most important thing. If you need leaders who are listening to their service users or their residents, to make sure that everybody's being heard. And I think, if you've got a manager who is struggling, it's really noticeable. If it's not working at the top, then something will slip as it goes down. I think most of the homes that I have visited where they're really struggling is either because the leader, the manager of the home is not there for some reason, or they've moved on and there's no manager in place, or the manager is not very good.
Something is awry.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, if you get really good leadership, it makes a huge difference, because everybody then, there's almost that relaxing, because you know that your leader's there, they've got your back, and you can then just deliver the really good care that you want to deliver, because you know that somebody out there is doing all the stuff that you don't want to have to worry about. It's when they're not there and they're not carrying out all those other bits and pieces that, you know, your managers do really well. They realize it's just an uncomfortable place to work, because there's, you know, something at the top's not working.
And it sounds like you get a sense of that when you go into a service really quickly, and I presume if you can, then a CQC inspector can as well.
Yeah, I think it's when you go and you speak to a manager and you're asking them questions which you have in your mind that they should know the answer to that. I'm not expecting the managers that I spoke to know everything, because nobody does, but it's that, well, actually, yeah, I know this, but actually I don't know that. But I know how I can find out that, you know, even if it's like, oh, well, I need to go and ask my owner that question, or actually that's not part of, I am the manager, but that's not part of my role. This belongs to somebody else. It's when they go, I don't know. And that's the end of the conversation. I think that's when you know that there's things are just not right. And you almost do get that almost instantly. You can almost tell straight away.
It seems astonishing in a way that somebody might behave like that, but I suppose an inspection situation is very stressful, and maybe you don't really know how you'll behave until it happens, or how your manager will behave if you're an owner or a provider yourself. If there's somebody listening who is a manager who has come into this conversation thinking, I have a quality problem, but is now starting to think, well, maybe the place to start looking to address that is not through looking at my compliance audits or my record checking or my medication checking, but actually maybe the first place to start is somewhere else. What would you suggest to them?
I would suggest speak to your staff. That's where I would start. Speak to your staff, good communication with your staff, because they will tell you if something's not working. They will know first off. And your quality of your care and your service starts with them. So speak to them first, because they will be able to say, actually, you know, yes, this bit of the service is really good, but this isn't, and this is why it's not. And listen to them. And I know, as you were saying earlier, Samir, sometimes it's really difficult to hear that something's not working, especially if it's something that you've put in place. But you're not the person there delivering that care. And sometimes they'll tell you there's a much better way of doing this.
Yeah, it's too easy to think that you have to solve every problem yourself, isn't it? And then I think become increasingly anxious about the number of problems that you're holding, and that becomes a cycle really quickly. So maybe that is a good way to break out of that, is just to sit down with all of your staff, or a small group of your staff, or one person from the staff team, and just open a space to say, what do you think we could do better? And see if you can make that experience more comfortable for yourself. I guess it is hard. We've all been deflated by a piece of feedback that was very well intentioned and probably quite constructive, but in the moment it's not very nice. Does it get easier, Samir? That feeling, do you learn to sit with it after you've seen how it can improve things?
Yeah, I think as you get a bit longer in the tooth, as I have now, I think when I was much younger, I used to take it really, really personally, like very, very personally. And I think now, with a bit of age, maybe a bit, as I say, a bit wiser, maybe. I think we have to understand how to manage that situation rather than, you know, what's being said. And it's about, as we've said earlier on, it's learning from that moment, and learning from that feedback that somebody's giving you, because sometimes it can be quite difficult for somebody to actually pluck up the courage to give you that feedback as well, right? Because they don't want to rock the boat, or they don't want to. So I think we have to be really genuine in acknowledging that and appreciating the fact they've come forward with that. And to be honest with you, I'd much rather we find that out before the inspector does, and I'd much rather, as an owner, be aware of any issues so we can try and focus some of our time and attention on getting that right, or getting it back to that level, or back to that standard that we want it to be. So I think we really do have to welcome any feedback that we get. But what's really important is it's not just a tick list to go, we've got this feedback, brilliant, job done, everything's fine. But we have to kind of do that whole wheel bit, don't we? Of, you said, we did, and this is what we've received. Make sure we're following that up and going back to people. But one thing I think our sector doesn't do as well with is actually celebrating those successes. And again, Robin, you and I have spoken about this a lot in the past, is when we do get positive feedback as well, let's share that and let's shout from the rooftops about that as well, because that's what will keep the fire burning in our care teams to be wanting to deliver that outstanding care that, as you said, we're all striving for. So it doesn't always have to be negative. Feedback doesn't have to be negative. Let's make sure we're sharing all the positive stuff as well.
If you get both in, and I guess you can always ask that happy person if they'd leave you a Google review to avoid the scenario that Nikki described.
You've got to love a Google review.
Well, I was thinking while you were talking about it is better to hear it directly, even if it's painful. Back to your comment, Nikki, that's where the bad reviews often come from, isn't it? It's somebody who either just doesn't feel they can express that directly, or they've tried to say, I'm not happy about this, and not had a response. I think we've all been there as a customer, where you've dealt with a business and just thought, this is a faceless organization, nothing's happening, and you go online and express yourself there.
Yeah, I think it's it's really easy, isn't it, to do something faceless and say, this wasn't working. It is much better if you can do it face to face. But I think it's also, as much as it's difficult to hear, Samir, sometimes it's difficult to deliver. And that may be the only way that you can do it. But I think what you were saying before about rewarding the good behavior, actually that's really important for your care staff, because they nobody's there to do a bad job. And I think if they realize that they are being thanked for a day's work or whatever, it may sound a little bit crass maybe, but actually it's really important, because they'll have given their heart and soul that day. And it's not going to be perfect every day, because we're all human. Not only are we humans delivering the care, but we're humans as we are accepting that care. And sometimes, I may be in a really bad mood, and whatever you do for me, it's never going to be good enough. But actually that person's trying really hard. And so it's really important that they're, it's recognised that they're doing their best.
Interesting. So in terms of immediate behaviours to stop and start, we're talking about being open to feedback, but also about celebrating the good. So stop only passing on the feedback that means you need to change something, but also pass on the feedback that says, please keep doing what you're doing because it's good. Is there anything that you think people will have in their homes? So they'll be recording or measuring something, but they're neglecting that information, or they don't think to look at it, or they don't understand everything that it could tell them about what's happening. I will have one thing that I was with a CQC inspector who asked for this data, and I didn't understand why, and that was the call bell recording, about how long it takes for a call bell to be answered. And I said, well, surely that's okay, I understand the measurement of that. But actually, he said, I'm not looking at how long it takes to answer the call. I'm looking to see how many times that person's called, and then the call bell's been cancelled, and then it's been called again and then cancelled. And that, I think, is a real good quality indicator, because that's showing that, yes, I'm answering the call within 2 minutes, but actually I haven't done anything. I haven't dealt with the need.
Dealt with it. I've had to go back and do something else. And I know that actually is really difficult, because you may be really tied up with somebody, but actually that interaction that you had with the person who did the call bell, did you explain to them why you can't do something right now? Or did you just say, I'll be with you in a minute, and just turn off the bell and go again? And I think that was something that I hadn't even really thought about. So I think that's something that's really good to look at.
That's fascinating, because I'm sure everybody has that, whatever type of call bell system you're using. Certainly the home I used to work in had possibly the oldest call bell system still going in the world, but you could, with some effort, you could go and plug a cable into it and download that data. And it's so easy now in a spreadsheet to find out how many repeat calls there were in the same day. And if you're not a spreadsheet person, you can probably get an AI to do that for you without too much difficulty. So, and I guess you have to take that data with the same curiosity that you spoke about, Nikki, when you were talking about the example of the shampoo. We're not trying to punish or challenge anyone here, but we want to understand what's going on there, because clearly the service user involved in that interaction didn't feel satisfied. Yeah, really useful. Thank you. So there's one thing that you can go away and look at this afternoon, or whenever you're listening to this, and see what your own data might be telling you about your service. That was absolutely fascinating, Nikki. Is there anything else that you think surprises providers, or that people listening might not be aware of or might not have thought about?
I think going back to what you mentioned before about when you get the report back and it's not what you were expecting, so you thought that you were doing everything, you were expecting good, let's say, and you got requires improvement. I think the most important thing is to really understand what it is that the inspector saw, because sometimes it can be, before you get your report back so you can do your factual accuracy, it's really important to use that time to actually understand where your inspector's coming from. I think it's quite easy from homes that I've worked with before who go, well, that's just how it was on the day. Well, actually, how have you articulated that with your inspector, that actually on that particular day, when your inspector comes, things were going to go wrong because everybody's a bit hyper and a bit scared about what's happening. Actually really make sure that you have that really good understanding with your inspector as to what it is that they saw that they made that decision on, because was that something that was just that day, or is that something that is a larger problem that you really need to work on?
More systemic. Thank you so much. That's really useful insight. We've been so privileged to have you with us. Thank you very much, Nikki, for coming. I think this has been a conversation that has really illustrated the value of having somebody else look at your service, a fresh pair of eyes, whether it's someone like Nikki, who you pay to come in and do some consultancy, or you come to an arrangement with another home that that just says, well, I will come and sit in your home for half an hour and you come and sit in mine for half an hour. That fresh pair of eyes and slightly detached perspective can really tell you a lot if you can take a deep breath and hear all that feedback. It's quite a frightening thing, I think, the potential for a gap between what you think you're doing and what somebody else will see when they walk in the door. It's a consistent source of anxiety that we hear about from DigiHive members. We know it's a very common theme, and I think it's really easy to see where that comes from. There are so many people in the sector who are working so hard and really motivated to deliver the best possible care, but don't have somebody next to them who can help them to see what's going well, what's going badly. And that's what the DigiHive is here for. That's what our academy is here for. It's to help connect people to other providers who do understand what they're going through and what they're feeling, who can help with non-judgmental, supportive feedback or experience that can just take you through a difficult process or help you to improve whatever it is that you're looking for in your service, and to give people a space where we can talk about what is working and what isn't. So that's very much what we're about, and I think we absolutely achieved that today. So thank you, Nikki, so much.
It's okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us, Nikki. And as Nikki's given us that vantage point that sometimes as providers we don't get from the ICB perspective, and from the commissioning aspect of things as well. And I think, Nikki, you've described actually trying to be confident is just so important, isn't it, in terms of when that inspection comes around, and knowing some of those answers, as you mentioned, some of those questions that an inspector or a commissioner would expect us to know in running our services. So if this episode has resonated with you, please do come and check out more of our content at the DigiHive community. There's a link in the show notes for you to join and listen to other episodes. And if you are somebody who is looking to join our pack of DigiHive community members, please do sign up, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Inside the Care Home. Thank you so much for listening and joining us. Running a care home rarely gives you time to step back and think. Most days you're just moving from one decision and on to the next. But this podcast exists to pause that momentum for a moment, to look at what's actually happening inside care homes, the pressures, the trade-offs, the things that don't always make it into the reports or the meetings. So if something in this episode felt familiar, I hope that's intentional. These conversations aren't about having perfect answers. They're about seeing the reality more clearly, so the next decision is better than the one before. I'll continue this inside look next time. This is Inside the Care Home.